at a spot where we can get this show rolling?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Bruce McDougall, Mayor Pro Tem, and substituting for Mayor Gear this evening. And Ms. Hunt, would you please, or I'm opening the City Council meeting for Monday, March 14th or 15th, 15th, 2021. Ms. Hunt, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Carter?
Present.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Here.
Ms. Moulton?
Here.
Mr. McDougall?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to section number 2 of our meeting tonight, announcements and committee reports. The mayor's COVID update is a little bit abbreviated tonight as the county has changed their reporting methodology. So it's going to be just a bit less data. Basically, and they've pointed us to the state's Department of Health website for the latest data. But essentially the summary is we have roughly a case rate of about 140 cases per 100,000 residents over the last 14 days. And then the county reports as of yesterday evening, Skagit County has had a total of 4,279 cases with an increase of 11 yesterday alone. 62 total fatalities to date and 272 hospitalized to date. So that's our summary abbreviated report. And of course, the city updates the report on the city's website as well regularly. So moving on from that, if there's no questions, Skagit County Law and Justice Council.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, Skagit County Law and Justice Council met remotely last week, Tuesday, which I think was the 9th. Myself and Chief Small attended. The one thing that came, well, there was a number of things, but on the vaccine part, it was interesting to hear some of the numbers that there was about a 500 case backlog of cases being prosecuted that are just generating from the COVID emergency. But the big subject, and the reason that's important, the big subject that we talked about was the impact of the state of Washington versus Blake, which had to do with drug possession cases and probably the term knowingly without getting too far into it. But essentially, Rich Wyrick, the county prosecutor, briefed the group about the impact. And the first thing was immediately three folks were released from the Justice Center, and then the impact. And to long story short, about 1,000 cases going only 4 years back just in Skagit County are likely affected, and they include meth, and just talking meth, fentanyl, heroin, and those things. And I think Chief Small chimed in with about a half a dozen Anacortes cases affected by that decision. So there was a lot of discussion of the fallout of that particular case impacting a lot of cases. So more to follow. The potential, the prosecutor put out a number of potential of $100 million in restitution. So again, a lot more on that, but it's a big concern to law enforcement. And I know Olympia, they're looking at some possible fixes, and some municipalities are looking at possible solutions. But anyway, more to come on that one.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, Mr. Young, go for it.
Yes. Mr. Miller, would you just take a line or two and tell, just for the state of the public, those that may not be as clear, what was the outcome of the state of Washington versus Blake? That gives contextual, right?
Yeah, I'm a little reluctant to go on a Washington State Supreme Court decision exactly what it says, but it essentially voided the impact of that Washington State Supreme Court decision. Had to do with knowingly possessing controlled substances, and based on that decision, it impacted a significant number of cases all across the state of Washington. And it also stopped law enforcement from arresting folks currently arresting folks solely on possession of things like fentanyl, meth, heroin. And again, I don't know the quantities, so I'm reluctant to throw all that out there. But again, it was a pretty impactful case, and it involved very legal terms about the term knowingly. So again, there may be some legislative fixes, but there's also some potential for municipalities to come up with some solutions.
Thank you. That was what I was asking for.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the Finance Committee. I know I have some notes from Finance Committee, so I'll cover that one. Pull it up here, bear with me. So the Finance Committee met last week, and we discussed an item that's on the agenda for this evening, which is extension of the remote council meetings resolution. And the date that the Finance Committee proposed was June 30th, which is the council can discuss tonight. We also discussed the Washington Park, or basically an additional amenity for Washington Park, which is to expand it with a public restroom at the facility there. So we were discussing, funding for that. We have essentially we have $90,000 in sort of leftover local improvement district funds, where there's no more local improvement districts in the foreseeable future. So this $90K is just kind of a chunk of money sitting there doing nothing. And so we actually kind of do need to spend it on something. So the Washington Park restroom seems to be, the Finance Committee kind of agreed that with the Parks Department and Finance, that seems like the kind of highest priority item that we could target. So we would have to combine it with some additional funds from either REIT or LTAC, and I think we're kind of still discussing that, and certainly feedback is welcome there. So that's kind of an ongoing discussion. We also did a Socrata recap. We got some updated pricing. We kind of discussed the different modules and how we felt maybe we didn't need the payroll module, because that one's like we feel we've got payroll pretty well covered internally, but there's definitely value in the others. We didn't come to a final decision though on that, or a final decision within the Finance Committee. I think we'll talk about it again. And that's the stuff I had. Mr. Carter. Was that Mr. Carter? Go ahead.
We also identified that, I guess after the meeting, that 95% of the overnights at Washington Park are non-residents.
Yes.
So we think that the restroom project may really fit well into the lodging tax funding source, because the price of the restrooms is something on the order of $300,000, and we have $90,000 in this LID leftover fund. So we would need to make up the rest in a couple of different places, and REIT can be spent on other things like our payment management program. So it was our sense that we wanted to try to avoid spending REIT if there were other alternatives.
Thank you. Yeah, that piece of information came in earlier this week. That was really helpful for that. All right. So if there's nothing else on Finance Committee, we'll pivot to Personnel Committee.
Yeah. Councilmember McDougall.
Go for it, Ms. McGrath.
It's a little bit different. Hey, thank you. So we had a meeting on March 11th for our Personnel Committee, and you, Mr. McDougall, and Councilmember Young and Mayor Gear were all there, along with our interim HR person, which is Emily Shu. So it was really nice for the five of us to meet and just kind of pick up. We paused with some of our our personnel meetings because we have had an opening for that HR position. At this point, it seems like we needed someone in that place to address the upcoming contracts that we've tried to delay. So Ms. Shu kind of gave us an update. There will be negotiations for the firefighters and then commissioned and non-commissioned police. So she just kind of gave us, and Teamsters also. So she kind of gave us an overview. She is kind of the interim person, so she's doing a lot of the legwork and research, and then we will actually have an outside negotiator work with the various unions on the updated contracts. Beyond that, we talked a little bit about the fact that, policies for our staff, our city employees have had a little bit of a gap. So she is going to work on updating them, and then we'll bring it to us all for review. It's really important to have clear expectations and responsibilities for both the staff so that they know what to do, but also for us to know what the city, for what expectations we have. The other thing we discussed a little bit was the fact that the negotiations and current contracts for various unions, because of that, we've seen some wage compression for those folks who are non-union. So we're going to probably embark on a study in this next year to look at the class and a comprehensive study. So just to make sure that people want to continue to advance from maybe a union position to more of those at-will management positions. The last thing is we talked a little bit about the fact that March 22nd we'll be moving to 50% capacity and what that looks like for the various departments, and hopefully, the library and senior center and our public meetings, so that we can actually see people face to face versus over a computer. So that's kind of the notes I had. If anyone else from that meeting has anything to add, feel free.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Young?
Yes. No, the only thing I wanted to add to that is, of course, Ms. Cleveland McGrath always does a fantastic job. But the only thing I wanted to add to that was that sometimes the staff, in their hard work and everything that they do, sometimes what we were asking for as members of council is to be notified of some moves that are being made. In particular, there was a discussion to come out concerning a director hire. And so part of that was that some of us didn't know, but we had already basically approved going forward. But what we came away with is that everyone would be sort of made abreast of what was taking place, and that more due diligence would be placed on that. And I thought that was important.
All right, thank you. And also wanted to add a big thank you to Ms. Shu for wearing multiple hats and jumping in and helping with this with personnel at this time. So thank you. Our next committee report would be the Public Works Committee.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Walters.
We had just a couple of agenda items. First of all, Public Works has gotten a risk and resiliency report about our water system, and it includes a cybersecurity component as well. We asked that report be sent to council. It's probably exempt from the Public Records Act under a security exemption, so it would come with an appropriate proviso. But it's worthy of our review. We on the committee haven't seen it yet. But there will be some capital facilities projects that come out of that analysis, and those projects we'll want to talk about and prioritize and put onto the capital facilities plan. So there will be more public airing of that sometime later. We talked about the wastewater treatment plant outfall project, including about the location of the outfall and a couple of different options. It seems pretty certain that Public Works is really oriented toward the option that makes a couple of 90-degree turns and ends up on U Avenue, rather than the alternative, which would go out T Avenue. Public Works is going to be going out pretty soon for a request for qualifications for a firm to do the in-water work, maybe in the next couple of weeks, I think they said. So this is moving right along. We also talked briefly about the South Fidalgo water system. Recall that we're working on transferring the water service area that currently belongs to Skagit PUD on South Fidalgo to the city, largely because it just makes sense because we sell Skagit PUD the water that they use to provide on South Fidalgo anyway. That is now moving forward again. Public Works is putting together Public Works and Skagit PUD are putting together a timeline for the list of projects that Public Works has identified as critical to make that transition happen. That list of projects is probably amounts to about $750,000. So Skagit PUD will need to arrange to fund those projects and do those projects, and then we can transfer that water system area. I guess we'll look forward to seeing what that timeline actually looks like, because we don't know that those projects are ready to go in their 2021 budget. And then finally, they just mentioned that universe of options presentation for potential replacement of the incinerator at the wastewater treatment plant is still coming. It'll be still at some future meeting. They've put together, I guess, a contract for the consultant to prepare that for us and present that to us. And it's on its way.
All right, thank you. If there's no more committee reports, I'll move to item number F in the announcements, and an announcement that Mayor Gear has appointed Jeffrey Holmes to the City of Anacortes Housing Authority Board to a term starting immediately and expiring December 31st, 2024. So thank you to Jeffrey Holmes for volunteering your time and your willingness to work and join this board. And I also wanted to take the moment to actually thank our very civically minded community, where we've got a lot of folks that volunteer to spend time on various boards and other committees. So thank you all to our community's volunteers. And are there any other announcements or reports from anyone? All right. Well, then we'll move to section 3, public comments. So this is where, if anyone would like to address the council on a topic that is not actually on our agenda for this evening. So do we have anyone who would like to speak? Not seeing any hands raised, so I think. Oh, we do have one. Ms. Kealoha. As soon as that unmute or that mute button comes off,
Okay. Sorry, I don't know if I'm speaking at the right time regarding the Anacortes Family Center and the $50,000.
That's actually a little bit. It's a little bit later in the meeting. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from you in a few minutes. All right. So if we don't have any other hands raised, we'll move to item number 4, our consent agenda. How would the council like to proceed?
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Miller.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second from Mr. Miller and Mr. Young. Ms. Hunt, do we actually do a roll call vote on this one, or do we just do an aye?
You can just take a voice vote.
Okay. In the moment, I forget what we do for this one.
No worries.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same side. All right, thank you. Motion passes. Item number 5 in our agenda, other business. And the first item on the agenda is actually, we're now to the Anacortes Family Center social worker contract. So who do we have lined up for speakers on this one?
I believe Ms. Swetnam was going to introduce that topic.
I actually think that Captain Floyd is going to be presenting on this, but I will be available and am happy to answer any questions about the specific contract provisions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Swetnam. Captain Floyd, do you have materials or other presentation for us this evening?
Sir, I do.
All right. Great, thank you. Go for it.
Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council, in addressing the needs of the community and the individuals within the community that are in crisis, the police department, parks department, Planning department and city attorney believe that merely adopting the model of social service outreach programs currently in use by other law enforcement agencies would not effectively serve the needs of the city of Anacortes. Social service outreach programs currently deployed in the area are hosted by law enforcement agencies much larger in size than the Anacortes Police Department. Similar size agencies in our region and the state generally do not have existing programs that adjust the needs of individuals in crisis. The city and the Anacortes Family Center have successfully worked together in recent years to address many of the same issues that individuals in crisis are experiencing during calls for service that the Anacortes Police Department responds to. The previously mentioned collaborative projects between the city of and the Anacortes Family Center have produced positive results, and the Anacortes Family Center has proven itself to be a valued and respected community resource. Prior to this issue being brought to council, the Anacortes Police Department and the Anacortes Family Center worked together to address a small group of individuals that were generating a disproportionate amount of complaints from other community members. By joining efforts and resources, the Anacortes Police Department and the Anacortes Family Center were able to bring some stability to these individuals through a secure place to stay, addiction treatment services, and employment. Complaints regarding these individuals are now nearly non-existent. City representatives from police, parks, planning, and legal departments subsequently began assessing the abilities already possessed by the Anacortes Family Center to provide services to individuals in crisis, and recognized that the Anacortes Family Center had the ability to provide services for individuals that are in crisis and provide them now. Contracting with the Anacortes Family Center will provide greater efficiency to the police department to get individuals in crisis increased stability by connecting them with the services and service providers that they need through the use of the framework already in place at the Anacortes Family Center. Contracting with the Anacortes Family Center would also aid in using funds allotted by council in the most efficient manner possible, as the city would not need to add or equip staff to perform a function that the Anacortes Family Center can already perform and has greater expertise in doing. The contract proposal before you is designed as a pilot project and has built-in mechanisms for community feedback with scheduled reporting to council as well as the public. This contract provides provisions 7 days a week, before and after normal business hours. The Anacortes Police Department and the Anacortes Family Center are planning to utilize an existing referral process that is already in use by the Anacortes Family Center and provides the Anacortes Family Center essential contact information for each person and gives the ability for both entities to track referrals for follow-up and statistical reporting. As an accredited agency, the Anacortes Police Department already tracks and does extensive analysis of data for use of force, internal investigations, vehicular pursuits, and bias-based complaints. Data derived from referrals to the Anacortes Family Center could be tracked and analyzed in a similar manner to assess program effectiveness and guide any adjustments necessary to make the program more efficient and or more effective. Contrast and comparison of statistical data for call responses prior to a crisis services partnership with the Anacortes Family Center will help forecast future needs when analyzed with continual incoming referrals for services and their ultimate resolution after contact with an Anacortes Family Center representative. The program proposed by both the city and the Anacortes Family Center will allow for referrals of individuals that are both currently and not currently homeless, as we recognize many of the factors that the Family Center will address pursuant to this agreement are the same factors that lead to homelessness, including but not limited to substance abuse, mental health concerns, employment security, and household violence. Preventing the possibility of homelessness by addressing these contributing factors proactively allows individuals in crisis to return to stability in their lives much quicker and much more efficiently.
Thank you, Captain. Thanks very much. Does anyone on council have anything they'd like to say before we turn it over and hear from some folks in the audience?
Mr. McDougall?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Yes, thank you. You know, as always, I'm very candid. I had a number of questions, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Chief Smalls today. And Chief Small explained a whole lot more about how this came about and how he got there. Originally, my question, I think that the reason this idea for an embedded social worker came about because of all of the national efforts that was going on, the protests that was coming around, and in some ways it was one of equity, but it was also one of standards for police. In speaking and realizing that our police department is superb, we really do have a superb police department. Part of the genesis of this whole idea for an embedded social worker was based upon the idea that if 30% of the calls that are being made have something to do surrounding that a social worker would be appropriate for, then working with the police department for de-escalation, all of those other things would make it appropriate. But I do realize that we have a unique system here on Anacortes, and our police department, again, as I will say, is superbly managed. There are things that everybody needs to work on. So the thought was that this would be embedded in there. And so the anti-racism group, to my knowledge, brought this up and brought it forward. My original questions were that I wanted to make sure that they were participating in this discussion such that the solution that came about would be one that would be not only something that could work for our city, but also for the Anacortes Family Center. And so I'm glad to see that this agreement came forward. Chief, thank you for explaining some things to me, and also Mr. Carter, Councilman Carter. So I felt good about it. There are a couple of modifications that I would like to propose coming forward. Instead of a 2-year test, I think a 1-year test we can renew it, but I want us to see how we're using it, if it's being used, what are those things that we're using it for, and how well we can begin that integration. That's one. Second thing would be, instead of yearly reports or quarterly reports, I would love to see a monthly report of the cases and how they're being handled and what's the follow-up. Last thing is that one of the provisions was for a response within 24 hours, at least in my knowledge, that most times when people are in crisis, and if they're being addressed for whether it's homelessness or whether it was some crisis management of mental health, those are people that need a referral right then. The expectation that 24 hours later, they'll use that card that was given to them to make a call to try to get into a service, I think that's somewhat folly. But I can live with this if we can talk about those changes.
Thank you, Mr. Young. It sounds like you're...
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Carter.
I just wanted to touch on that. And one of the things that I also agree with would be a 1 year versus 2 year, because we have this budgeted out for this next year. It would only make sense to have it a 1 year contract to see how things are working, because it is a pilot program for us, kind of. And having it budgeted for the 1 year, we should do it as a 1 year contract to see how it's working out. And then as for the reporting, doing a monthly reporting, at least initially, you know, if nothing else, at least for the first 6 months, if not the whole year, just so we can kind of keep tabs on how it's working out, so that we can plan out the following years coming up. Just so we can, you know, instead of waiting, you know, every 3 months for a report, every 6 months for a report, we can tackle any issues immediately because it is a pilot program.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
Thank you.
I feel that a one-year pilot program is appropriate. As far as the reporting period, I feel that quarterly would be sufficient because monthly will just be a quick snapshot and requires, I think, a little more administrative time also. And I feel like that quarterly reports will give us a better idea of what happens over time. So I'm fine with quarterly. And then one question about the 24-hour services. I believe that someone can answer this question for me, I'm sure, that the person in crisis will be contacted rather than need to initiate the contact with help. Is that the case?
That's correct.
So it's not like giving a card to someone and say, hey, call this number. They will be contacted by the social service provider.
Correct. Yeah. The idea is if it's after hours, we would send the referral to the family center with the contact information of that individual, whether it be a phone number or a location where they can be contacted. And the family center, we wanted to allow them a reasonable amount of time to be able to get a representative to that person. But we wanted to not be unrealistic in the amount of time that they had to respond.
If I could further up on that, Ms. Moulton, I really appreciate that follow-up because it really does help allay some of my concerns. Many of you may not know that, but after one of those marches we had in our city, we were having a poetry reading in Causland Park, and there appeared this one homeless guy. I didn't know he was homeless, but at the end of the day, when he came to the microphone and said, I'm homeless, he had been drinking. I've kind of adopted this guy over this period of time. And what I've learned about some homeless with addiction issues are that their intent is good and they may mean it at the moment that they want help, but the expectation that they can be followed up on is harder, particularly if they're homeless, because you're not going to know where to find them. So I know that that's not something that this contract may be able to fully allay. I think it's a good contract, but I would like to see a portion, even if on weekends, so many hours could be on call because it may be a unique situation then that allows immediate action, because other than that, you won't get another chance to see them until there's another occurrence of whatever was happening. That's my only concern about trying to reach back out to them. And so that would be something I would like to see in this contract.
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Walters, and then I think that was Ms. Cleland McGrath.
When this presentation and proposal came to us in the HACS committee, we also raised the concern about the length of term. Originally, it was a 3-year term, and now the proposal is a 2-year term. I definitely take the point that we've only allocated 1 year's worth of funding. Of course, that's all we can ever do because we are only doing a 1-year budget right now. But I wonder if Mr. Johnson, who's on the line, Dustin Johnson, might be able to speak to the question of whether the Family Center would be interested in a 1-year term.
Mr. Johnson or Mr. Kaufman, can we, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. The Family Center is more than open to a 1-year term. I think the initial idea was that it would be a 1-year pilot project, renewable for the potential for a 2nd or 3rd year. So I think that is doable for us. And to the point about the 24-hour response, I just wanted to quickly note. So the idea, and as you'll read through the contract, you'll note that when we have staff in the office, we'll be responding to this in real time. For calls to our existing motel voucher line, there is a 2-hour window of response to allow staff to get back. When we have staff in the office, these calls will be dealt with within the business day. The 24-hour response is more talking about if something were to come in at, immediately after closing time, it would allow us to be able to get back into the office, assess the situation, compile the necessary referrals, and then respond to the person in the appropriate measure. But certainly if the police department called and asked for a response or some support right away, we, assuming safety measures were in force, we could certainly help and respond, in short order.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I think that's important. It does seem like we have a number of council members here that are interested in a one-year term. The contract as drafted does say that we can re-up it by mutual agreement for 2 additional one-year terms. But upon mutual agreement, we could re-up it for a 100-year term. I mean, that line is kind of surplusage. We're not constrained that way. I just would point out that the HACS committee, the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee, is still at work on preparing that 6-month review of social services in Anacortes. And this is one component of that, but not the entirety of it. And so I don't think that we should prejudge what we want to do for the next 2 years with this amount of budget until we've completed that review and then given it to the full council and the full council has analyzed it. Because this is an aspect of social services in Anacortes, but there are a lot of other things too. And it's all a matter of priorities. So I definitely agree and urge council to settle on a one-year term at this point, or through end of year, whichever we might end up doing, and then revisit this in anticipation of the 2022 budget.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Yes, no. Those are the answers to the questions I have, and I'm absolutely satisfied. I do think that this is a great mix of effort, not only for our police department, but also for the Anacortes Family Center. I think that this begins to address some of the issues that we did not have solutions for, and I'm happy with it. And again, to the Family Center, I will say we look forward to continuing to work with you guys, the stellar job you've done, and to our police department. I just want to thank you guys for just really stepping up and doing the job that you do and finding a solution we can begin with, and then we can all see how this works, whether the tweaks or whatever needs to be made. Thank you. I'm happy with those changes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And I accidentally missed, I think, was it Ms. Cleland McGrath wanted to say something, or was it Ms. Moulton?
It was Ms. Cleland McGrath. Thank you. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So yeah, just kind of expanding on what Councilmember Walters said. This relationship between the Family Center, the Police Department, and the Parks Department has been kind of an informal relationship, but it's proven to be very effective. And so I think from a HACS committee perspective, it was really the most efficient fix is to formalize this agreement so that we aren't letting vulnerable folks not get the services they need, because it's clearly a priority for the public, for our community stakeholders, and we heard that. And so yes, this is a quick fix, and I think it's a good fix that's going to work well because those relationships are there. But that it's true. I think the quarterly report is probably a little bit more reasonable, just because, as we all know, kind of checking in on a once a week basis and getting the services and then seeing the results each month could be a real kind of stop and start report. Whereas quarterly, we can get a better sense of the trajectory of how the different departments and organizations are working together and the success or challenges that those at-risk folks are having. So I think that as Mr. Walters mentioned, we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that we understand and have organized and make available the existing social services and network for Anacortes and our county and region, but that we are going to continue to assess them and make sure that we bring in various stakeholders, all the stakeholders that want to participate, so that we can either tweak our relationship with the Family Center or figure out how to address our really local challenges. And we want to find a fix that addresses, our challenges, not necessarily what other communities have faced. So I'm glad to see participants on this call, and I think we'll probably hear more from them. But I think this is a really, really good step forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland McGrath.
Mr.
Anyone else? Yep, Mr. Miller? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just I think it's a good contract. I think other council members have pointed out this is not the only resource that's available to citizens of Anacortes via the Anacortes Police Department. It's not an embedded social worker in the Anacortes Police Department. I think because of the challenges, geography of using those resources in the other parts of the county, but I think it's an embedded social worker on Fidalgo Island. And I think the Anacortes Family Center, I appreciate the work that they've done in the past, and then formalizing this relationship, I think is a good thing. I think a one-year contract makes sense based on how our budget is. I think the quarterly reporting is fine. I'm sure the Family Center through the police department, the city, or would come to us at the monthly mark and say, hey, our stats are way out the window. We've had 100 people use this service. Let's take a look at this again, or something like that. I think we would get that input at a monthly mark if we needed to. And then I think the other, can't remember if that was those were the other issues with the contract. 1 year quarterly reports, fine. And again, thanks for the partnership.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right, if there's nothing else from council, let's hear from Mr. Carter.
Yeah, I'm fine with the quarterly. I was wondering if it would make sense that, because we are going to discuss the budget again at the end of the year, if the contract is just through this year versus 1 year ending in next March. That way we can readdress it when we're doing our budget.
Even though, Mayor Pro Tem.
Go ahead, Mr. Young.
Yeah, no, even though I brought up that issue of 1 year, I don't know how we might need to work it, but I do think that a fair assessment would be 1 year. Now, if there's a way we needed to structure it such that we can guarantee continual funding, and also the tweaks and final review about extension of the program, I'm okay with that. But I just want to make sure that we give a full opportunity for all of us to look at how this is really working. And to that last point of quarterly reports, I'm okay with that. It's just that in the quarterly report, I would like to see how it translates month to month, so that shows a pattern, and I can live with the rest.
My understanding is the contract is a 12-month contract, and it's being paid for from the 2021 budget. So those dollars, the contract would come to an end, like say, end of March of 2022, but it's 2021 budget dollars that pay for those kind of last 3 months. So hopefully that takes care of that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Go ahead, Ms. McGrath.
Yeah. I would say that it needs to be and I should have backed up. I will not be voting on this because I am a Anacortes family member, or Anacortes Family Center board member. But my inclination is that it's a full year, in the sense that, if it starts April 1st, you're going to go a quarter where you won't see anything until July. And so if we're ending it, we will only have 2 reports before it's essentially almost over. So my inclination is to see it go a full year. If we determine towards the 3rd quarter that we want to go in a different direction, then that gives us kind of a transition period to figure out what we're going to do next and take the appropriate steps. But my inclination is to honor a full year contract, since we've got the funding available.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and you're right. Good point. We will have at least 2 reports in, assuming quarterly. And so we can certainly hopefully make a reasonably informed decision when it comes time for, November budget discussions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Captain Floyd.
I'd just like to bring 2 points to council's attention. One, expanding on Mr. Johnson's explanation of the response hours. It just should be noted that they have staff available 7 days a week, so it wouldn't be a huge gap on weekends. And then also regarding the reporting, you'll note the wording in the contract proposal is no less than quarterly. So if it became necessary that we needed to update council on anything that was significant, we would definitely do that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. At this point, we can go to members of the audience who would like to speak. We've got Ms. Eastman in line, and Ms. Kealoha, if you wanted to address us as well, go ahead and raise your hand again. Mr. Johnson also in line. So, Ms. Eastman, when you're ready.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to say gratitude with a big capital G. As someone who's on the front line in mental health right now, we are getting slammed. And to know that this is going into effect, I could not be more grateful. As I spoke to the council before, and I've spoken to several of you individually, I have held this kind of position with a police department in another state. It's a very effective way to provide stopgap in support in a crisis. I just want to echo some of the things that have been said and also challenge something. One thing I agree, it needs to be 1 year because the data collection on this is essential. I suggest you get a social work student to assist the family center in collecting the data. The data needs to also be, from a research perspective, from the time the call is made, the intention of the caller. And the reason I say that is because I have had personal frontline experience with clients who have called in, have stated a certain crisis, and the follow-up was not correct in terms of what best practice standard is in mental health. So I would like to see what the caller identifies as their issue and what the follow-up is. And I'd like to see those reports done by a researcher. Secondly, I have the monthly data or the quarterly data. It depends on the social work team or whoever does the research. The other thing I'd like to challenge, having done my research and talked to other social workers who are doing this kind of work, communication, direct communication, timely communication has been essential. Direct access by listening to scanners, having one-on-one conversations with officers has been absolutely essential, and they will tell you that if without that, the program does not succeed as well as it could. So I know given COVID, that's difficult, but the embedded part of this role is direct communication. So I agree after a year, we need to review the research, but I would like you to consider the fact that it may work well to both associate the social work and collaborate with the family center, but also in the future embed the social worker, meaning they work out of the center, but they also have direct access to communication with the police department on a regular basis. So that's my gratitude and my thoughts. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for the, the valuable feedback. Next up, we have Will McCracken.
Okay, am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Hi, my name is Will McCracken. I'm a citizen of Anacortes, and I was part of the initial push for the embedded social worker program in the first place back at the end of last year. And I wanted to express, similar to Katie, a gratitude and an appreciation for this program going through so soon in the first place and getting something that is severely needed for the community in my eyes. And I would also just like to ask for this to be a year where we are willing to discover new things about the support that's needed in our community and think of new ways and new options to support those that are in crisis and that are in need. And I think that this is a really great first step. And that's a thing that I've heard a couple times during this discussion, is this being a stepping stone to further action. And so I am totally in support of the idea of this being a one-year contract, in the sense that this year should really be used as a research opportunity to find out things that we might not even be fully aware of about what our community needs. And I think that there's just a chance for this program in the future to be a radically compassionate thing and add a sense of radical compassion, not just through the family center, but through the infrastructure of our city as is. And so I'd like for this to be a really transparent program with the city and the family center and the community. I'd like for us to know what's going on, essentially. And I'd like for this to be a stepping stone towards bigger and newer things. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And that's all that I have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McCracken. The hand raised list seems to be shuffling a little bit. I know Ms. Kaloa has had her hand up the longest of this group. So could we go to her, please?
Thank you, City Council. I have personally, just like as an aside, paid hotel rent for multiple houseless people who have slipped through the fingers of the AFC. So I have anecdotal evidence of the ever-growing needs that our area that the Anacortes Family Center just can't meet for some reason. But also thank you for your commitment to talk about putting additional resources towards the Anacortes Family Center. But you released this packet on Thursday and there was no time for public comment except for today, without like any decent amount of time of research. Hopefully you guys aren't voting on this tonight, but if you are, I find that kind of unacceptable. You promised our community, who came out very loudly to express their support for an embedded social worker in the ranks of the Anacortes Police Department, that the city would commit 6 months of research, which included speaking with Compass Health and other cities who have already implemented an embedded social worker, as well as the $50,000 to implement this program. You also promised community stakeholders would be included in this research, in which I feel we were not included and actually feel purposely ignored. Instead, it seems as if the City Council and the HACS Committee have gone behind the community's back without input of community stakeholders and have done a backdoor deal with the AFC. I think that the HACS Committee had a meeting on February 21st, which no one was aware of. But I guess you've got to like follow that line and really beg them to give you that info. Anyways, paving the way for a multi-year deal with the Anacortes Family Center, which now you guys are talking about one year, and that's still completely disregarding your promise to our community while acting as if you actually are compassionate towards our community's actual needs, while also disregarding our community's demands for transparency. We need more data collection and more transparency. We need more than hotel vouchers for the more than 35% of all calls who can benefit from an embedded social worker. And it was you who only a few months ago promised our community that you would fully research and explore that option while including the community directly, while also setting aside $50,000 to do so. Please remember that you promised our community that just a few months ago, and your obligations to this community, as well as to your personal honesty and integrity. Also, just because the presumptive police chief, who is also joining the board of the Anacortes Family Center, that kind of creeps me out a severe amount, because that doesn't make him correct. It actually confuses me even more and confuses the issues. Why is he doing that? Embedded social workers only improve the dynamics of a community and the police departments after rooting out systemic issues in which every community, no matter how unique and amazing as some have claimed in this meeting are, it's important for our community. As the
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Kaloa. Thank you.
All right.
I do want to mention that as Mr. Walters mentioned, the HACS committee is in the middle of that 6-month research process. So that is not a program that is complete. That's something that is very much ongoing, and all city council meetings are open, or city council committee meetings are open to the public. So if there was one that somehow missed being published, it's meeting time. If you would please send me an email, and we'll look into, if indeed it's I guess public notice had been missed or something like that, because they're all open to the public.
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Walters.
Actually, on that point, I think it's worth noting the council committee meetings may be being published, but I don't think are being very effectively opened to the public. City council meetings, by the terms of the amended Open Public Meetings Act for the pandemic, have to offer a call-in number. And I've suggested 4 or 5 times that we get that for our committee meetings as well. That hasn't happened yet. Our meetings are held with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft is offering a free call-in service for a year. I don't know if we've got the city signed up for that or not, but it really does need to happen for all of our committee meetings, but especially for the HACS committee. We will, on the HACS committee, be inviting people in to talk to us as part of our fact-finding and research phase, which has hardly begun yet. This program and this proposal is really work from the Parks, Police, and Planning departments, and really is not a proposal from the HACS committee, although it was presented to us at one of our meetings.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Walters.
McDougall?
Was that Mr. Young?
Yes, no, I just wanted to echo Mr. Walters and just say that I totally agree. I think that going forward, whatever we need to do on council to make that happen, I'm willing and to join forces to make that happen. I just think that it would be so helpful, and I think it would allay some concerns. It's a tremendous amount of work that I know all the committees go through, and a lot of in-depth thought into processing how can it best be done. And I just think that having it open would allay some concerns in the community, but also at the same time be even that much more transparent. So I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Young. All right, our next individual who'd like to address the council, Ms. Clark.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, so just to briefly echo, I do agree that having more communication with the community about when committee meetings are happening is really crucial, because we need to be involved in those conversations. And so I really appreciate that information. Thank you for sharing that, Bruce and Ryan. Just to say that I do echo Katie Eastman's point that this is a great first step towards an embedded social worker in the police force. As the data points in other cities, of course, Anacortes is different, but not that exceptional, in that the closest communication that can happen from when calls are received to when support is offered is what's necessary. So just to broadly say, the council committed to 6 months of research, and we really need to have more understanding about how needs have been met in 2019 and 2020 at least, to then compare what this upcoming pilot program may look like. And we need to have that commitment in the language of this proposed document. And to me, there's some gray area in that. Under city responsibilities in section 3, we're compiling data by the city that may be used to assess the efficacy. That needs to be changed to will be used. In the same way, under AFC responsibilities of compiling data for quarterly reports, we need to have that data compared to what follow-ups were to these 30 to 35% of calls that would have been better supported with the help of a social worker. What was that follow-up like? if we don't have that information, how do we know what the success of this potential pilot program may be? So what I'm concerned about, but is an excellent opportunity, is that if we only approach this from the 9 to 5 working hours of a nonprofit, then there's going to be gaps. In the same way, if we only approach it from the police department that's never done this before, then there will also be gaps identified. So the HACS committee, as well as with community input and consultation from existing embedded social work programs in the region, we really need to create new methods. So not just working from a perspective of the systems that we already have, whether it be from a nonprofit or a city department. So I really am just going to emphasize that we need to consider this next year as a time for research and not just for active implementation in order to really figure out what's best for our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Ms. De La Rosa.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh,
It's a
good
little
evening.
choppy.
Sorry about that. Good evening, council and community members. I am calling in, and although I am a board member on the AFC, I'm actually calling in tonight as a community member and as a mother with a child that suffers from mental illness. Back in 2019, during the holidays, I was called to check on my child, do a well checkup on my daughter who had missed work. And when I got to her residence, she was clearly not in her right state of mind, resulting in me trying to take her to the hospital on 3 separate different occasions. And being at her age, she was over 18, they told me that there was nothing that they could do, that they couldn't hold her if she was non-compliant. And I said, well, obviously there's something wrong with my child. Her doctor at the time was out of town because it was Christmas. At that time, one of the ER nurses at Skagit Hospital had told me that the only suggestion that they had was that when my daughter either becomes a threat to society, to the community, or to herself, that I could call the police. This was terrible, hearing this. My child went from being an average, normal working person in the community to that night, 24 hours later being a completely different person. Luckily, at the AFC, there was a social worker that Mr. Johnson had came to me and said, would you like, us to have our social worker help, in this situation until you can get in touch with your doctor. At this point, it was the only option I had. I had taken several days off of work, and it helped immensely. So I guess what I'm getting at is I've never, to hear that from a physician and to hear that that was my option, having somebody that I love and care for being arrested because she was at the time suffering from what they called acute psychosis. So to have a social worker available in these circumstances, I would greatly appreciate in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. De La Rosa. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Eric Johnson. I see we have Dustin Johnson also coming up.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall, and thanks to the City Council for pursuing this program. I just want to note that the genesis for this effort predated George Floyd. It was a concept developed in 2016 when the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee gathered together more than 75 community members, social service providers, and educators to attend a workshop to determine local community strengths and challenges in providing human services to the citizens of Anacortes. At the end of that workshop, several issues emerged as pressing, and number one among these was the need for a co-located human resource center in Anacortes that would work with the Anacortes Police Department and other departments in providing human services. Social service agencies do provide human services inside and outside of Anacortes, yet the lack of a physical presence for these agencies pointed out a number of shortcomings, and that is what this enhanced social service coordination will be doing at the Anacortes Family Center. But there are a number of shortfalls. Department, at the time we looked at this in 2016, the Department of Health and Human Services had 1,170 individual monthly services provided in Anacortes, but no physical facility present here. So other than the support provided by the Anacortes Family Center, the first responders by default in providing human services were the Anacortes police officers. And from my observing their actions, they do a great job in treating those who are living on the margins, those who have mental health conditions. But this isn't their area of expertise. And in 2016, we thought it would be more expedient and more efficient and more responsive to the needs of the citizens in Anacortes if there are a one-stop agency in town that will work with the police and coordinate the provision of these human resources. And I think it's encouraging, certainly, that the City of Anacortes and the Anacortes Family Center are working together to provide the first response in providing for these human services. And this effort to bring together nonprofits and government-run support and services and the community members together locally will go a long way in meeting the needs of the citizens of Anacortes. This is a program that's been 5 years in the making, and it certainly is a time to move ahead on this with vigor. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Saxton is next in the line.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I'm Evan Saxton, 1714 10th Street. One thing just to start, if Captain Floyd tends to attend these city council meetings, he would know that the more than 50 individuals who spoke up in support of an embedded social worker is not exactly a small number, as you know, the way these meetings tend to go. That said, I'm pleased to learn that the City Council is establishing a new pilot program with the Anacortes Family Center and committing funds to support their programs. Having spoken with Dustin Johnson personally about this program, as well as the two brief updates from the HACS committee, I'm thankful to learn that our city is expressing a commitment to addressing some of the needs of our vulnerable population. Expanding the city's collaboration with the Family Center is encouraging. In December, City Council voted to commit 6 months to exploring the implementation of having a mental health professional work in conjunction with our police. This was expected to include meeting with other embedded social workers and speaking with police departments and mental health service organizations who have already built embedded social worker programs for their communities. Additionally, $50,000 was put aside to fund the fruits of that discovery in the second half of 2021. The primary argument made by the scores who were opposed to an embedded program, including the head of the Anacortes Police Services Guild, was that we have adequate resources in place here in town and that extending additional funding to those resources would be sufficient. One anecdote repeated from other communities who have already embedded such programs is that they've found vouchers and referrals to be ineffective compared to a truly embedded program once they had established those programs. While I don't doubt that the AFC will make the most of these funds, we need to continue evolving and transforming our community policing model to meet the standards set by communities both larger and smaller than ours. It's an important start, and I expect City Council to follow through on the commitments made when the 2020 budget was approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saxon. Mr. Dustin Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. And I am grateful to hear from everyone tonight. And I just want to expand on a couple of points and touch on a few things to hopefully address the concerns that have been noted. The idea of this program has always been that it was a starting point. I think Eric Johnson noted that this program has been in evolution since 2016. That is absolutely true. We expanded on it earlier this year with a three-way agreement between the Anacortes Family Center, the Anacortes Police Department, and the parks to kind of do a test program for folks that we knew were in acute need and needed the assistance of social workers and case managers. And from that success was born this program. This is certainly not the end. This is certainly the beginning, and we will continue to use very intentional actions and really find very thoughtful results and bring those back to the community as a whole. I attempted to do that very thing with a group, including Katie Eastman, who spoke tonight, Will, Kate Clark, Evan Saxton mentioned it. This was brought to those groups in an attempt to bring folks into this process, and that won't be a solitary event. I am open to having these conversations all the time, so that this program can really truly address the concerns of our community and be a program that addresses the concerns and helps all of those in our community that need help. We will be incredibly intentional about collecting data and using that data to inform better decisions and better policies. So to all the folks that mentioned that, I echoed those sentiments and will do and make give my personal word that we will follow up and bring those to fruition for your review. So again, anybody that has thoughts, concerns, or feedback about this program, we are absolutely open to receiving that and look forward to giving information back to everyone so that we can make this process even better.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do we have anyone else who would like to address the council this evening?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr. Carter.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of feel like there's two different arguments going on right now. One is there's the embedding a social worker with the police department, and there's actually getting people who need help with social services. And I tend to think that embedding a social worker with the police department is only doing part of the problem, is identifying individuals that need help. And I feel like partnering with the family center is kind of taking care of both. Whereas we're not only identifying those individuals, but we're also giving them money to help them after the police officers leave. Versus just having a social worker with the police department, they're only going to identify. And I feel like the issue is not in the identification of the individual. The issue is getting the help after everyone is left. And that is the part that the family center is going to play, is after the police are gone, after the situation has settled down, they're going to be there, stand in contact with the individual to get them the help, which is where I feel that the city is lacking, or even just our county. And so I kind of want to separate those two issues, and I feel like we keep going back and forth on those two issues, you know, putting a social worker in the police department versus getting them help. And it's the getting them help is where the lacking is happening, and that is what we're trying to address.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Go ahead, Mr.
Good. Mr. Walters, I think you were next. I'll go right ahead, but the whole point
Go ahead,
is,
Mr. Young. Yes.
Mr. Carter, I totally hear you, and I think those are two arguments, and you're absolutely right. I think, though, that where we are now in having this opportunity for review and to sort of begin the test and try and bring care now is, I think, suitable in this trial with the Anacortes Family Center. I think it allows, with participation from the community, to have input, to be able to look at the collection of data. I think, as Ms. Eastwood said, as well as Ms. Clark, as well as others, I think it gives us a basis point of starting. And then from here, over this next year, we can see what's working, what's not, how we may want to move forward, where it ends up. I think that it given us this next year to make that determination with participation by everyone, I think we can still serve those people that are needing us now. And then without condition, look and see where we might envision ourselves as a city and best use of those resources.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Walters, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think one thing Ms. Clark said that struck me is this year needs to be about research, not just implementation. I think that's what we were trying to achieve when we referred this to the HACS committee as part of the budget. Sounds like we'll be sending this contract back for some revisions, which I think is appropriate. Quarterly reporting, one-year term. And also, could we either prescribe the data collection standard either in the body of the contract or just put a line in there that says that the family center will provide data in a format prescribed by the city. I think it would be worthwhile to coordinate with the family center and APD, but also to give a call to Ms. Eastman for some insight into the metrics in her experience that would be useful. Put that together and prescribe a format for the family center, because we definitely do need that kind of data so that we can make good recommendations in the HACS committee, but good decisions as a council as well. So I'd be okay with sending this back to staff to make those changes and then approving it on a future consent agenda.
We get a head nod on basically changes that Mr. Walters outlined. 1 year, 12-month term, quarterly reporting, some tightening of the language around will provide certain data.
Mr. McDougall?
Ms. Moulton, yes.
Thank you. As I agree with that, I would like to see this done as soon as possible, because part of our mandate, as I see it, is to do the research, yes, and take the time, but also to help people now that we all, I feel, have a sense of urgency. So let's do this as soon as possible.
Thank you. I agree.
Mr.
Young. Yeah.
Ms. Clark, would you submit those suggestions that you also had to council so we can look at that? And I totally agree with Ms. Moulton. This is an urgent need that we're having right now as a community. And I think that what we're really talking about is language. The main thing that we're trying to do is get it implemented, at least to test, and see where we go from here. And then have all the input of the stakeholders to see how we can better utilize this service and make it work. So I agree. Let's move this forward as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And I completely agree as well. I think what we have before us is bound to be imperfect, but it is a great start. And it's something where implement it quickly. I expect, on what it looks like on day 10 or day 20 is actually, it's not going to look the same on day 360, because we will be learning as we go throughout this process. We'll also incorporate data that we've accumulated, as well as the more holistic look that the HACS committee is taking over the next few months. So I'm excited to get this thing started as quickly as possible. So thank you all. And it sounds like we're going to try to bring that back to consent agenda as soon as possible with some changes. So no one has anything else on that item. We can move to 2021 Stormwater Management Program Plan. Okay, cool. Do we have Mr. Buckenmeyer or a delegate from Public Works?
Just going to do a brief introduction for Diane here, and I'm going to hand the baton over to her. Thanks. So I want to introduce Diane Hennebert. Ms. Hennebert is our city's NPDES permit coordinator. She's been doing a wonderful job. Under her guidance, our stormwater program has really undergone some significant improvements. Wish she wasn't here to listen to me say that, but it's true. And then with that, I'll just let Diane explain some of the good work she's been doing and what small part of it that she's going to do tonight. Diane.
Thank you, Fred. I'm going to share my screen and PowerPoint for you tonight for our 2021 Stormwater Management Program Plan. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, the members of the public joining in. Happy to be here and present our 2021 Stormwater Management Program Plan. Stormwater is the leading cause of pollution in the Salish Sea, with water pollution pretty much nationwide. And the federal government recognized this in 1972 when they passed the Clean Water Act. And one of the things that came out of the Clean Water Act was the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which has a permit system which trickles down to us in the form of our Western Washington Municipal Stormwater Permit, which I oversee our compliance for. I'm here to give you my annual update on what we're doing this year to meet the terms of our permit and also provide an opportunity for the public to comment. So I broke our presentation down into the different permit sections to tell you what we're up to. Start off with stormwater planning. The overall goal of stormwater planning is to ensure that stormwater management needs and protection of the health of the receiving waters are a part of the planning process, and to make sure that these policies are implemented appropriately. In 2020, we formed an interdisciplinary team for stormwater planning that goes across several divisions and departments. And so moving forward in 2021, we will continue to meet and work on our short and long-term stormwater planning goals for the city. We'll continue to have low impact development as our preferred and commonly used approach to site development. And annually, we'll assess any barriers that we have within our city processes towards the adoption of low impact development principles and what we can do to improve the way we do things. And also within stormwater planning, it's a 5-year permit cycle. We have our stormwater management action planning is a new program. And in 2021, we will be collecting all of the data that we can find research studies on our receiving waters. Ultimately, at the end of the cycle, we will have identified a priority stormwater basin that we will then have targeted education and outreach and retrofits and planning to improve the areas where it is most needed. Public education and outreach. The city is part of a regional partnership that's been recognized by the Department of Ecology for its effectiveness. We're in it with the Skagit Conservation District and the other NPDES permittees here in Skagit County. So it's the county and the cities of Mount Vernon, Burlington, and Cedar-Woolley. By working together to do our education outreach, we can offer a much wider variety of intensive programs than any of us can do individually. So as part of our partnership, we offer things like the Watershed Masters Volunteer Training Program, Backyard Conservation Course, Skagit Stream Team. We offer an annual private stormwater facility maintenance workshop. And the city also contracts with the Conservation District for elementary school programming. They have an amazing watershed model and associated curriculum that's aimed at the elementary school ages so that they can come in and teach our students with great hands-on activities. And I'm looking forward to schools opening up enough that I can resume working with the high school students on some education and outreach activities. We also partner with other groups within the community. In 2020, we partnered started a partnership with the Salish Sea School so that we now incorporate stormwater curriculum into the marine conservation work that's being done with the youth. And we've partnered with a new program from Friends of Skagit Beaches that I'll talk a little bit more a little later, doing some outfall monitoring within the city. And in normal times, I table at a lot of public events and hoping to be back at them a little later this year. Public involvement is a really important piece of this. Allow the people who live here to have a say in what we're doing and how it's impacting our waterways. Trying to provide as many opportunities as I can to bring people into the program and to the decisions we're making. For this program plan that I'm presenting tonight, I have it posted on our website. It is open for public comment until Wednesday at the close of business. It's on our stormwater page. And I also sent drafts out to the Fidalgo Bay Aquatic Reserve Citizen Stewardship Committee, Friends of Skagit Beaches, the Skagit Marine Resources Committee, the Samish Indian Nation, and it was in your council packets to try and get a wide variety of people to comment on it and help provide guidance for where they want to see things going. And our plan will be finalized soon and submitted with our 2020 annual report. And once those go into the Department of Ecology, they'll also be posted on our website for the public to be able to view and continue to comment on. The city has already implemented a really comprehensive mapping program. It's fantastic. It includes all of our conveyance infrastructure for our stormwater system, our treatment and flow control facilities, receiving waters, drainage basins, land use within those drainage basins. We're really ahead of where the permit requirements are, and it's been incredibly useful. This mapping system then also connects to a database that can give us information about development in the basin or the stormwater infrastructure. So we're doing really well on that part. I also want to mention our cartograph program, which is our asset management program that not only does it have mapping in with that, but it gives really detailed information. I can pull up a storm pond and give you the full history of when it's been inspected, what the inspection reports were, what maintenance has been done and when. So we're really doing well on that level. Illicit discharge detection and elimination is another really important piece of our permit and our compliance. Catching those spills and dumping and illegal connections to the storm system and making sure that these spills are cleaned up and problems are dealt with. We've had an IDDE hotline for many years that we've advertised, but in 2020, we also launched online reporting. It's a website there where you can go in, and it's really useful in that reports can be submitted any time of day or night. You can include pictures, supporting information. You can pick what kind of communication you want, whether you want to remain anonymous, whether you want someone from the city to contact you. I think that that'll be a really useful tool moving forward. And to get this information out to the public, we have ads in every issue of A-Town, twice a year ads in the Anacortes American. Again, I normally table at community events and have magnets and different things that we can hand out so that people have this information available to them. And this year we'll continue to partner with the Port of Anacortes and the Samish Indian Nation as we work together to find the sources of any kind of spills or suspicious looking discharges that we see. And we'll still be out there screening our system and keeping an eye on what's going on. Stormwater issues have really affected development. The controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites is critical. You know, with the things that we allowed to be built here in Anacortes are going to impact our waterways for decades to come. So we have development and construction regulations that include requirements to reduce pollutants in our stormwater runoff, really stringent requirements about incorporating low impact development, erosion control, best management practices, and inspection and reporting, and that's for both public and private projects. All of our projects, again, both public and private, go through stormwater site plan review to make sure that it's meeting all the minimum requirements under our permit and following low impact development principles. We have inspections prior to construction, during, and post-construction, and require maintenance agreements for privately owned facilities to ensure that long-term maintenance is being done on all the permanent stormwater facilities. So we'll continue on with that. We've been having annual trainings with a senior stormwater engineer from the Department of Ecology, and we'll continue that into this year so that we're always at the very forefront of what the requirements are and how to meet them. Our O&M crews, they're amazing. They do so much work on our storm system. We have over 4,200 catch basins in our city, and they inspect and clean all of them on a 2-year cycle, along with maintaining 80 miles of storm pipe, over 50 miles worth of ditches, maintaining our storm ponds and our vaults. We annually inspect all ponds and vaults, both publicly owned and privately owned, that have been installed after 2010 to meet our permit requirements. They have a street sweeping program that all our roads are being regularly swept. This aids in keeping all of the debris and street waste from getting into our storm system and then into our waterways. And they're out there during and after our big storms, monitoring all of our treatment and flow control facilities to make sure that everything is functioning properly during these storms, and have really done a lot to prevent flooding in the city. And we use, as I mentioned earlier, the Cartograph asset management program for that, so we can see in real time what our crews are doing and where they're at and what they're taking care of. Another new program in this permit cycle is the source control program, which is really about preventing pollution at the source. Whole lot easier to deal with spills and poor business practices before they get into our stormwater. It's a lot harder to clean it out of the stormwater after it's already there. So moving forward, we'll be working with local businesses and industries to put in best management practices that will reduce pollution. In 2021, we'll be working on the municipal code that will set the foundation for this program, and building our inventory database and finalizing the structure of the program and how it will run in our city. And the final piece is monitoring and assessment. The city, we have 2 different options: build your own program or feed into a regional program. The city pays into the Stormwater Action Monitoring Program, which is a regional program by the Department of Ecology. It does our status and trends monitoring and effectiveness and source identification. So they compile all of the illicit discharge reports from the region to really look at what our problems are and moving forward, how we can best address them. The city also does go above and beyond just these minimum requirements. We coordinate with the Samish Indian Nation on the sampling that they do in Fidalgo Bay and the waterways that feed into Fidalgo Bay. We'll continue through 2021. And also this year, we partnered with the Friends of Skagit Beaches to launch a new citizen science outfall monitoring program. Friends of Skagit Beaches secured a grant to buy equipment and do data processing for this. And we trained up volunteers who are now monitoring our outfalls at least on a monthly basis, doing basic water quality measurements and looking for illicit discharges. And I'm really excited about this program. Not only is it training up a whole group of local residents to be aware of stormwater issues, but it's also providing us with really useful information as we move forward with our stormwater planning, short-term and long-term. We'll be able to speak with much more confidence as to which areas would be the most efficient use of our resources to address. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to update you next year with what this first year has provided us information-wise. So in closing, I do want to say a huge thank you to the council and the city leadership for your support of the stormwater program. It really takes all of us to build a strong stormwater management program and protect water quality in the Salish Sea. And we've been doing a lot of work over the last couple of years, and I couldn't have done it without the great support that I've had from all of you. I really appreciate it. So that's what we've got coming down the line for 2021. And if there's any questions or comments, I would love to hear them. And my contact information is up here if anyone wants to get them to me later.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you, Ms. Hennebert. I think that we are doing really well with stormwater here in Anacortes. I also just want to say I really appreciate it when we are able to build these plans and reports in-house without farming them out to a consultant. I think that that's the right strategic move, and that it enables staff to internalize the components of these plans and keeps that knowledge inside the organization. In addition to development review, which having gone through it myself recently, I know we're doing a good job at for ensuring that new development manages stormwater properly for both water quality and water quantity. It seems to me that we've got most of the city built out, most of the city built with inferior stormwater measures from the past. And we need to do as much as we can for retrofits. So for example, on my street in Old Town, I understand that there is not any kind of water quality mechanism, mechanical device, or anything that is filtering the stormwater runoff from the streets before they hit Fidalgo Bay or the Guimas Channel. We do have public involvement activity PI 5 on page 19, which I'm very familiar with. It's continuing the partnership with Samish and the Anacortes High School Green Club to promote rain gardens in Anacortes. I do feel like we could be doing a lot more in that area. We've had a couple of really great successes, especially that success on 32nd Street. But the concept here is that homeowners install rain gardens in the right-of-way. They help beautify the street, in my judgment, but they're just really inexpensive for the city. The city provides a little bit of manpower and coordinating and prescribing, what can go in the right-of-way. And then the landowner buys the soil, buys the plants. The Green Club shows up and does all the labor in a matter of a couple hours. You put 30 kids on a project and it happens quickly. I mean, it's huge. And I assume that those kinds of projects are having a real effect on water quality because it's some kind of filter that otherwise maybe just doesn't exist at all, or maybe exists in a really limited fashion on some of our streets. So I'm glad that this is mentioned in the plan, but I wish that we could build it out a little further and put some money behind it as well. Maybe just by shuffling money that is allocated to some of the other activities, depending on priority. But it seems like it has the most potential of maybe almost anything else other than new development review.
I do think that one of the things moving forward that I would like to do is get a lot more involved in promoting rain gardens locally. I think another thing that will help under the stormwater management action planning is when it'll be more towards the end of the permit cycle, but what comes of that is identifying your priority basin. And then we can really focus within that basin on city retrofits within the stormwater system, for the areas where we're having the biggest problems, and targeted outreach, encouraging rain gardens and natural yard care processes. So I feel that moving forward, not only can we really encourage rain gardens, but we'll have a lot of good information to put them where they'll be the most effective also. But yes, I agree, rain gardens moving forward can be a great cost-efficient way to start making a difference.
Mr. McDougall, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Young.
I wanted to add, I love where we're going with this, and I also agree with Mr. Walters how we can build this out. I just wanted to add and tag on to the tail end of this. One of our prior discussions that was coming forward was the idea of blue zones and how the runoff water and what we're trying to do, and also possibly moving our city toward blue zones, I think is a wonderful thing. And I think that this will be part of what will help us in the long term, help the sound as well. But I think it's a great idea. And I'm looking forward to figuring out how we can tie those two things in together and then implement those changes that are necessary to push us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any other thoughts or questions from the council? All right, well, thank you, Ms. Hennebert, for the update. It's terrific. And,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, 5C, Anacortes fiber internet update. We have Ms. Xu or Mr. Lemberg with us.
Thank you. I will be presenting tonight. This is Emily. I'll just go ahead and get the file. Sorry, it's saying that something went wrong on my computer, so I'm just shutting some things down. So just 1 minute, please.
No worries.
There we go.
All right, looks good.
Mayor, Council, or Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and then members of the audience, I'm pleased tonight to present the March 2021 Access Anacortes Fiber Internet Monthly presentation. I always like to start with this slide. It's our GPON customer count and revenue. And now we have a full year of data in front of us. Last March, we had 9 customers in service. That has grown exponentially, and we now have 624 customers. And our revenue has grown with that too, from $1,191 a month a year ago, now to $41,329.25. So our network has grown, and it continues to grow. So I like just to see this trend. We've been averaging around 50, between 50 and 60 installs a month for the last several months. And this provides some additional information about what those customer orders look like. So we currently have 537 residential customers and 87 business customers. If you look at the areas where we currently are able to provide service, so that's the commercial business district, Old Town, M Avenue, and the 2020 aerial areas, we have a total of 782 orders of the potential 2,273 customers that we can serve. We are right on the edge of a 35% market share in each of those areas. I do like to point out that the 2020 aerial areas, we were not able to begin servicing them until December of 2020. And so those orders in those areas still are continuing to come in on a regular basis. So I'm pleased with the process that we have there. As we look out to the west end, where we're currently doing the design work, we already have 19.2% take rate. So those are folks that have already put in their orders for when we're able to get to them later this year. And then the remaining areas of the city is another 22.9%. So There's certainly interest in the network, and the issue is how fast can we get it to them? I think that is a good problem for us to have. This is a visual of where those orders are, nicely interspersed throughout the entire city. Our 2021 expansion area is highlighted here in orange, and that shows you just a visual of where those orders are coming in. And as I mentioned, we have 441 orders in that area already. So our fiber technicians are out every day. We are doing installations in the service area. This area, what we've tried to do is just be able to designate all the areas that we provide service. They're all in green. So we currently have 182 orders in queue for customers who are in our current service area. And we are systematically working through and getting them into service. In terms of our network expansion, this is a common question that we get. Where and when can I expect that you're going to be in my area? So we are doing in 2021, we're doing the design, construction, and installation in the west end. And what we have designated that to be is west of Anacortes Mine Road. So we will pass 2,375 premises. And the funding source for that is the Savvy Bank line of credit, up to $4.5 million. Our next area is the east of A Avenue, and that's currently backfilling our current service area. I do have a map that I'll show you after this. There are 1,815 premises in that area. And the timing of this really is based on whether or not the EDA grant is approved. It's an Economic Development Administration grant that we applied through the Department of Commerce for $2.25 million. In 2023, we expect to do that little area that is east of Anacortes to A Avenue. There's about 875 premises in that area. And then we will follow up with the urban growth area along Highway 20 and Marsh's Point soon after that. So this is as we're doing the full expansion throughout all of the city limits. As we mentioned, the 2021 expansion, this is just a little bit bigger map. And we have added this Marine Heights area in our design and construction. So we will be doing that area as well here. So right now, the design is nearing completion. We're having regular meetings with Noanet, who's doing the design work with us. We have begun placing the material orders. And it's our expectation that we're going to have approximately 65% of the premises within the city of Anacortes served by the end of the year with the addition of this west end. The 2022 expansion, this is the A Avenue East backfilling, and all the areas in brown are those areas. This is dependent on when we receive additional information from the Economic Development Administration on our grant application. We have had positive news that the grant application has progressed to the next level of review. And this part of the project still requires design, construction, and then the installation work. So those brown areas pass 1,815 premises.
Mr. McDougall.
Sorry, I was muted. Mr. Walters?
If you just, yeah, thanks. Hold on that slide. So I think it's just worth reiterating here that this is the area that qualifies for the grant. If we get the grant, our only opportunity is to spend it on this area, more or less. And we can't spend the money until we get the grant. So that's the holdup on this area. I have all that right, Ms. Shu?
You do have that correct, Mr. Walters. The Economic Development Administration really is focused on job growth. And so we will be, doing this area along here where there is still remaining industry. with job growth that is necessary and important to be able to demonstrate that this is a project that they want to support within the city of Anacortes. We also have beneficiaries here along D Avenue with a new school with the Samish Indian Nation, Integra, and the MJB properties have all signed on as beneficiaries of this project and been able to designate that they will be adding additional jobs within the community as a result of the expansion of the municipal fiber network.
Yes, I just thought it was worth pausing and reiterating that, since this was the area we were going to do next. But if we are able to hold off and get federal money to pay for that expense, I think we, as a council, made the decision that makes sense to the overall financial success of this project.
Thanks for that clarification. You're correct on that. While we're also, preparing for the expansion of the network through the design work out in the West End, we're also working on some special projects. In March of this year, we will be putting tenants into service for the Port of Anacortes, the Bartholomew Road property. We will be bringing the Anacortes Senior Activity Center online, and the fiber will be extended to the city property. And this is going to replace what they currently have as just a wireless connectivity. So we'll provide much better service to them. We're working with Rock Island Communications on 2 separate leases. One is a dark fiber lease with connectivity into, across the valley. And another one is for a dark fiber lease for medical services. So we are working with them on those 2 separate projects. As part of the West End, the Western Washington University, the Shannon Point Marine Center will be looking for a dedicated internet access to their facility on Shannon Point. That will be part of the West End, and then doing that special project with them. And Island Hospital will be bringing an additional site online with the dark fiber lease in late 2021. So there's a nice level of activity for these special projects that we are also working on. So the things that we're just continuing to be working through is that we are awaiting the EDA decision on our grant application, and we will be bringing forth the contract to council, a contract for construction in our 2021 service area. So those things will be coming before you sooner than later. We are continuing, even as things are beginning to open up, to be very careful and cautious with our in-home installations and in-business installations with our COVID PPE protocol, ensuring that we're providing a safe working environment for our employees and also for the residents and businesses who are trusting us to go into their homes and businesses. And then I just like to point out that the city of Anacortes is really unique in that we are offering the services as an internet service provider that's municipally owned. It has a fiber backbone, and it's completely owned by the city. We're not working with other municipal service provider or other internet service providers to provide this service. And so if people have any kind of questions about the network, one of the things that I think that it really differentiates us is that we want to have the conversations. It's as easy as a telephone call to CJ or Amy in our main office. They're always there to answer questions. We respond to emails. There's no black hole if you have a question about the fiber network that we're putting in place here. We want to be the first and the best source of information for people. And in doing that, we also want to have plans that make sense, that are easy to understand, that if you sign up for a residential plan, you know exactly what your service is. It's going to be symmetrical, and that your upload and download speeds are going to be the same. the pricing, the rate you see here is the rate that you'll be charged. We're doing this starting out with just a really basic installation fee of $100. So residential plans go month to month. There's not a requirement that there is a long-term commitment. We hope that it's going to be the service that we provide that causes people to want to be long-term customers with us. And with our business plans, we do have a 12-month contract. So we try to be simple. We try to have fair pricing, to be very approachable, and have superior quality in what we're offering. So we're hoping to continue to just grow this network every single day, and are always so appreciative of the orders that are continuing to come in on a daily basis. We monitor them as they come through and do a little happy dance here every time we see them. So the community has really gotten behind us, and we want to continue to get access out to everybody in the city limits. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Ms. Xu, I wanted to thank you and the team for your continued efforts. It's great to see the continued progress, and the numbers are looking good. And also thank you for really kind of the reminder to the community, the pitch that, you know, this is your community-owned fiber optic network and community-owned internet service. It's something that we as a community have built for ourselves to have terrific internet service and, you know, to provide a great experience to the customers, you know, the residents of the community that subscribe to that service, both from the performance and the price, but also from customer service. And I think the team is doing a great job of all of those things. So thank you.
Thank you. We're honored to be able to help provide and keep these people in the service, our customers in the service.
Any questions or thoughts for Ms. Xu?
Mr. McNougal.
Mr. Walters.
The customer service aspect is actually a really huge component of the customer satisfaction here, I think. Everybody says that. You know, they can pick up the phone and get assistance. Even when it's their problem, somebody will answer the phone, and then they know where that person works too. It's a real differentiator between our service and other people's services, and it's a critical part of the success here. Just like you can also call if you have trouble with your garbage service or your water service or anything else, and you know who it is that's answering the phone on the other end. It's really great, and I hope that part of it continues.
One thing that I think that makes us different than some of the other services is that maybe people don't have a choice in their water, sewer, sanitation. People have a choice in the internet, and we want them to feel very confident that access to Anacortes fiber internet is the right decision for them.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you for the report, and I guess we can move to our next agenda item. So moving to item 5D, Resolution 3025, extending the duration of our original Resolution 2082 for temporary procedures to respond to the COVID epidemic. And Mr. Hogland, I'll pass things to you.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall, members of the council and members of the audience. I'll share my screen real quick just so we can all see the proposed resolution. So this is Resolution 3025, which is a proposal to extend the duration of Resolution 2082. So Resolution 2082 was the initial resolution that outlined the city's response to the COVID crisis. It was adopted, almost exactly a year ago, March 16th. For about the past 6 or 8 months, we've kind of generally been extending it for about a quarter at a time. So the proposal on this resolution is to extend the resolution to June 30th. And we've got in the whereases of the resolution here, we've got that history laid out. So this, when we put the packet together last Wednesday with this resolution, it was the day before. The day after we put this together, the governor's office came out with information that phase 3 was going to be open or allowed on a statewide basis starting March 22nd. And there was supposed to be additional information to follow. I believe that's supposed to be published this week. Haven't really seen that. So what we've seen so far about the phase 3 is potentially to have up to 50% capacity in buildings or in public venues, or 400 people, whichever is less. But there was supposed to be, as I said, more information coming, and it's not clear how the Public Meetings Act is going to be affected by that, or if it will. But this resolution, so all that to say, I'm hoping that this will provide a venue for us to discuss that a little bit. I think it's prudent to have an end date on this, as council has been doing this in the past. Certainly easy enough to repeal this by another resolution or adjust it by another resolution if something changes. And we do have staff constantly monitoring those communications from the governor's office to make those adjustments as needed. There was one thing I was going to point out. We discussed this in Finance Committee last week, and this is the original resolution, Resolution 2082. In this section, the city's response, Section 2C, identifies that the city will close Anacortes Public Library to the general public and provide updates to the city website on remaining library services available during the term of this resolution. And as council is aware, the library is in the process now of preparing for phase 3. You'll remember that even a couple of positions were approved by city council to aid in that effort to get them ramped up for that. Item D is a little more, I guess, a little bit hazy too. I wanted to point that out, where we identify the city will increase efforts to sanitize parks and public spaces which remain open. And that was the case to begin with, but essentially what we've done since then is close the group camping and the group picnicking reservations, but the other park infrastructures do remain open for public use. But that's kind of the extent of what we've got tonight for the resolution. We could put this into effect, extend it to June 30th, what we have into effect now, and come back, reconsider on an as needed basis as more communication information comes out or as things change, or if council has other questions or comments, we'd be happy to hear those.
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, thanks for the talk on that. When I initially saw that date, I'm thinking, wow, that's out there. I could probably support that date, but I really think we need to at least try to build some plan for, say, a 50% opening capacity, like our first council meeting. What would that look like? What do we need to do to be prepared for, say, a July, probably, if that's probably a holiday, but a July 6th council meeting with 50% capacity? How can we do that? And the same thing, like you mentioned, the library, we'd like to, we need to anticipate what the guidance is going to be from the governor's office or the county health, and not, I just don't want to be in a position where, oh, they're opening things up to 75% and we're not quite ready for it, if that makes sense. So I guess the bottom line is I'm okay with the date, because we can always pull it forward. I just don't want to be not prepared to safely open.
Yeah, you make a great point, Mr. Miller. The mayor has begun a kind of, I think it's a bi-weekly sort of reopening plan discussion with her department heads. I attended the first one as well. And so it's something that definitely is being worked on as far as the details of what that looks like, and percentages and things like that. So we can...
Sounds good.
Okay, we can perhaps ask the mayor for kind of an update on plans, say in a month or two.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Walters.
I think Mr. Miller makes a good point there that we need to have a plan. Until everyone is either eligible to be vaccinated or eligible and actual vaccinations are available, I don't think that we ought to have a situation where somebody needs to risk their health in order to come to a city council meeting or a planning commission meeting, which means we need to be able to provide for remote participation even if we are meeting in person. And I really, really want that to be a conversation between council and the IT staff, not just the IT staff making some decisions with other staff in a vacuum. Because what that looks like, there are many different permutations possible. It's got to be fast and fluid for us. We need to be involved in an interactive conversation with IT to figure out how that works. And I don't see how it's not possible that we do this without some kind of hybrid remote and in-person participation. And we're going to need time. So I'd be supportive of adopting this resolution now so that we have that time to figure that out. I would also, though, modify Section 2C in Resolution 2082, which closed the library and which said something about parks that is inconsistent with what we're doing. And so that those sections simply say that they'll follow public health guidance and the governor's directives regarding reopening. So that could be a later resolution, or we could just modify this one and then bring it back on consent.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. We could easily modify this, bring it back next week on the consent agenda.
Mr. McDougall? I agree with Mr. Walters. I think it would be great to modify that language about library and parks and bring it back on the consent agenda. I also want to echo his earlier comments about public participation in committee meetings and working with IT on that, because it's really time for us to do that, especially for things like the HACS committee when we are reaching out to stakeholders, and that's a vital part of our next 3 months of work. And we need to make that easy, so the sooner we do that, the better. So I'm just saying it publicly, but however we go about that, we need to also start that. I feel a real urgency in that regard. And the other committee meetings, of course, as well.
Hello, am I back? Thank you all for carrying on without me. I can't wait for my Anacortes fiber in 2022. Did we do a head nod on Mr. Walters' suggested changes and bring it back on consent agenda? Okay, great. Thank you for catching me up. Any other thoughts or comments on this item? Well, I did want to mention that I'm in agreement with Mr. Walters. I'd like to actually see the ability for the community to participate remotely indefinitely in city council meetings. I think it's really a nice amenity to be able to add to, to expand access to the community to us and the deliberations, what's happening here. So yeah, hopefully, speaking as a council member, we can make that happen. And then if nothing else, if anyone has anything else for the good of the order? All right, well then we'll close this evening's meeting, and thank you all very much. And we'll see you next week.